They provoke defiance, conjure fantasy, inspire awe. Perhaps they are all the more frightening because they are real. In the 1925 silent film classic, The Lost World, Hollywood exploited the fascination for dinosaurs and introduced them to a huge audience. The battle between these two great beasts was considered a tour de force of the imagination. In fact, all that we had was the fossil record, ghostly proof that the Earth was once inhabited by a race of giants. Though all that remains are their bones, this mute evidence sparked a scientific quest which began in a rather unlikely place. Paris at Dawn recalls a painting by Monet. Today, Montmartre awakens to the same sights and sounds that lured a generation of artists over a century ago. Lautrec, Cézanne, Renoir. Paris remains steeped in art and culture, yet few are aware of the immense scientific discovery that took place beneath the sidewalk cafes in the shadow of the Cathedral Sacré-Cœur. In the 18th century, Europe was still locked in religious dogma. Based on biblical truth, it was believed the Earth was only a few thousand years old. The ancient world was unknown. Then a startling discovery was made in Montmartre. It was 1796, and gypsum, the original plaster of Paris, was being mined to rebuild the city after the French Revolution. As workers descended into the quarry, they began to uncover more than gypsum. The discovery of strange bones and animal fragments caused a sensation. The fossils were brought for examination to the laboratory of a brilliant young anatomist. Georges Cuvier had the uncanny ability to identify animals from a few odd bones. He believed that each group of animals had a unique architecture. Each bone was a clue to the design. By comparing the fossils found in Montmartre with living species, Cuvier made an astounding discovery. In an historic lecture, he announced that the fossils were the remains of creatures long vanished from the Earth. Creatures now extinct. Today, the Museum of Natural History in Paris is a monument to the work of Georges Cuvier. Housed here is his original collection of fossils and drawings. It attracts scientists like evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould of Harvard University. Gould considers the revelation of extinction a great achievement. But in Cuvier's time, it was overshadowed by doubt and controversy.
At the end of the 18th century, a major debate arose as to whether animal species could become extinct. Lamarck, the great founder of evolution, denied it. Thomas Jefferson, our president, wrote an article just before he became president of the United States, arguing that extinction in principle could not occur. Now, the man who established the fact of extinction also worked here and was a colleague of Lamarck's, the great French paleontologist Georges Cuvier. You might think that extinction is a negative phenomenon and not particularly worthy of importance, but that's not so. It's extinction that gives the Earth its history, because if all the animals live all the time, you have no way of telling time. It's always the same. But if animals die and new ones originate, you begin to establish painstakingly the stages of a lengthy history. Now, this specimen is the most famous in that sequence. It's an animal called Paleotherium. Cuvier found it and recognized that it was closely related to modern horses and tapirs, but clearly was not like any modern species. Was a creature that had died out, that had become extinct. Here's Cuvier's original drawing of the Paleotherium. You can see the bones in black, and then Cuvier tried to reclothe the fossil animal in flesh. He recognized from this bar of bone above the nose that the animal had a short snout, like a modern tapir. Going further back, here's one of the most famous of all fossils, the mosasaur of Maastricht, discovered in Holland in the 1770s, brought to France after the Revolution. It had been called a crocodile, but Cuvier recognized that it was a giant seagoing lizard. And so we have a sequence, a history, in which the further back you go, the more unlike modern creatures the animals become. And by this procedure, Cuvier established a lengthy, continuous, and sensible history of the Earth, thereby making that fundamental contribution to geology's greatest effort. In so doing, people could recognize that dinosaurs, which were being discovered about the time that Cuvier was working, were not just peculiar big creatures that had lived for a while and died, but the dinosaurs, in fact, were the chief denizens and inhabitants of an entire world of great duration that lasted for more than 100 million years before there were any large mammals at all.
Georges Cuvier raised the curtain on the stage of ancient life. His discovery revealed an Earth much older than ever imagined, yet it would be almost a century later before the full drama of the dinosaurs would begin to unfold. In 1877, the American frontier was moving west. It was a time of trailblazing adventure and daring. Complete dinosaur skeletons had been found in Colorado and Wyoming. The discovery would launch the great American bone rush and ignite the bitterest feud in the history of paleontology. Edward Cope was brilliant and ambitious. He wanted fame and fossils. His rival, O.C. Marsh, had the money to pay for them. Driven by jealousy and greed, their methods were often less than subtle. Before their rivalry began, only 9 dinosaur species had been discovered in all of North America. But in less than 20 years, their feud had added another 130 species to the list. It was a phenomenal achievement. Now, paleontologists could assemble the bizarre creatures that once roamed the ancient Earth. Piece by piece, the dinosaurs emerged in exquisite detail. The word dinosaur is from the Greek, meaning terrible lizard, but the skeletons were of a different creature. Unlike lizards, dinosaurs had massive bodies and legs and stood fully erect. Clearly, they were unique. Lured by something new, the public flocked to see these giants of a bygone era.
Good for you. Tyrannosaurus rex. It was one of the last dinosaurs to appear on the face of the Earth.
Today, the Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology in Alberta, Canada, is the world's newest showcase of the dinosaur.
To suddenly appear back here in Drumkeller some 70 million years ago. In all likelihood, this dinosaur, if he were all fleshed out and were out hunting, wouldn't even pay any attention to us.
The battle for the bones is over. Now it's a battle of ideas. Being challenged are long-held beliefs about the dinosaurs. We think of them as dim-witted, sluggish, and obsolete, doomed to extinction. But were they? What were they really like? A new generation of paleontologists is re-examining the fossils. The hunt is on to understand the physiology and behavior of dinosaurs, to bring them to life.
Okay.
Even children are rediscovering them.
Change the hair. Push 7. Push 7. Change the tail. It's gonna look just no tail. Yeah, the tail.
At Dynamation International in Southern California, dinosaurs are resurrected from the past through the magic of electronics and engineering. A baby Triceratops is fleshed out to appear as lifelike as possible. Based on the latest scientific information, these automated robots will serve as powerful teaching tools, custom-built for museums.
Claw, inner three fingers with claws, the outer two, no claws. They're all like that. And, the classic dinosaur paw, you know.
Robert Bacher of the Museum of the University of Colorado in Boulder serves as a design consultant to the company.
And even, in a sense, the great Tyrannosaurus, because she got only two claws, right? And they are the first two fingers, thumb and forefinger. Okay. The ancestors had more.
Bacher is one of the new breed of paleontologists who have challenged the orthodoxy that dinosaurs were reptiles, a proposal that has fanned a storm of debate.
Every generation of scientists has to assume that a lot of what they've been given is right, so you can do something new. And every once in a while, it's healthy to go back and say, well, maybe everything we were taught is wrong. Or maybe if we turn it upside down, it makes more sense. And that's what struck me in the 60s, that if you turned dinosaurs upside down, if instead of being cold-blooded and stupid and slow in the swamps, they were warm-blooded and smart and lively on the land, it started making a lot more sense. But there's always this challenging by orthodoxy, and I guess it's healthy, you know? It keeps you honest, keeps you fighting. As Zorba the Greek said, if you don't fight, you die, right?
Bacher and his colleagues are convinced that dinosaurs were much more active and vigorous than previously thought.
The way I've done this guy, you can see the sort of horn-rimmed glasses of bone that go around the eye from behind. And the eyeball itself arranged so that the right and left eye can see directly forward, right? Stereoscopy, binocular vision. It had depth perception.
At the heart of the debate is the question of whether they were cold-blooded, like reptiles, or warm-blooded, more like modern mammals. If they were warm-blooded, as Bacher believes, many of them would have had high metabolisms, high levels of activity.
The foreclaws look beautiful, too, especially that big curved thumb claw.
Originally, they were a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
The new theory is driving Dynamation's designs in every detail. If they were warm-blooded, many may have been highly active and surprisingly aggressive. Evidence comes from an out-of-the-way place, Dinosaur Valley State Park in Texas. Exposed by the slow weathering of time, the elements, and the ceaseless flow of the Paluxy River, these footprints offer alluring clues for dinosaur hunters. Trapped in stone, they have lingered here for more than 100 million years. The citizens of the little town of Glen Rose have capitalized on the footprints. They've actually developed a small tourist industry around them. Director of the local museum, Jean Mack, recalls them from her childhood.
First time I saw him was out at Wheeler Branch. And I had an uncle who was a bootlegger, and of course he hid his whiskey out there. And he saw all these markings himself. I believe George Adams, the ones that had found them out there, and we all went out to look at them. And my stepfather said, oh, they're Indian markings. And of course, I wasn't but 10 years old, and I thought, if Indians didn't make those tracks, if they was going to make them, they'd been in a straight line. It certainly wouldn't go around in circles just like they was just milling around.
The strange markings would make news in 1940 when Roland T. Byrd of the American Museum of Natural History led an expedition to bring back specimens. Draining a section of the Paluxy, he found the footprints of a giant brontosaur, the first ever discovered. Over time, the changing course of the river had washed away millions of years of sediment to expose the tracks. The find was astounding. Before Bird's discovery, scientists believed these giants languished in swamps where the buoyancy of water supported their immense weight. But the Texas footprints told a different story. They were not prisoners of swamps, but land animals capable of moving freely throughout their environment. Tracks have now been found around the world. A glimpse of a moment in the life of a dinosaur, they may also be an important clue to their physiology.
37. From right to left, it's about 169 centimeters. Okay, it's 169 centimeters.
Okay.
The distance between the tracks can tell a scientist how fast an animal was moving. A simple mathematical formula shows that if you know the height of an animal's leg and the length of its stride, you can determine its speed. Robert Bacher.
Now, if dinosaurs were cold-blooded, they would only need a cold-blooded amount of food, which means they could cruise, they could move at an average speed that was slow, as a giant lizard does today, as slow as a giant tortoise. They could move at 1 or 2 miles per hour. That would be enough. And their average footprints would look like this. The average cold-blooded T-Rex shuffling along. That would be fast enough. But if Tyrannosaurus rex and its kin and its herbivorous prey were warm-blooded, they would have to cruise faster because a warm-blooded metabolism demands a faster average speed, looking for food, looking for water. So a warm-blooded Tyrannosaurus rex would leave footprints like this. Twice as fast. A theoretical 10,000-pound warm-blooded T-Rex would be cruising at 4 miles per hour. Faster than a pack of wolves, faster than a pack of hyenas, emphatically a warm-blooded pace. And in the herbivore Triceratops was nearly as fast. Tyrannosaurus rex moved on average hour to hour, day to day, not at a cold-blooded shuffle, but at a hot-blooded cruise. And so did its small relatives, and so did its herbivorous prey, so did Triceratops. So the overwhelming mass of evidence from hundreds of dinosaur footprints is their world was one not of the cold-blooded shuffle, but of the hot-blooded cruise.
The debate continues. But with each new clue, we gain new insight into the physiology of dinosaurs. Far from the world of cold-blooded reptiles, it was a world filled with vitality and activity. A world of hot-blooded competition and ferocious aggression. A world where both predator and prey were superbly adapted to their surroundings. A world far different from today. "80 million years ago, the Atlantic Ocean was young, and the continents were slowly drifting apart. The central portion of what would become North America was covered by a vast inland sea. It stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada. On its western shore, the Rocky Mountains were being thrust up by immense geological pressure. Humid, warm, and tropical, this lush landscape was the domain of the dinosaurs. Today, it is Teton County, Montana. Here, Jack Horner of Montana State University's Museum of the Rockies made a fabulous discovery. In 1978, at a site now called Egg Mountain, Horner and his colleagues discovered the first nearly complete dinosaur eggs ever found on the American continent. The evidence would open a whole new horizon of knowledge about dinosaurs. This rocky outcrop was once a small island, close to the shore of a great lake, not far from the salty inland sea. The lake was shallow and the island one of many. Nests containing clutches of up to 12 eggs were unearthed here. It was a unique and significant find.
They dry out over a period of years and they just begin to crystallize and everything is...
It might even be a hadrosaur tooth fragment.
Perhaps this was once an enormous dinosaur breeding colony. Nothing like it had been discovered since the Central Asiatic expedition to Mongolia in 1922. With 125 camels, 4,000 gallons of gasoline, 3 tons of baking flour, and a fleet of specially equipped automobiles, the expedition set out for the Gobi Desert under the leadership of Roy Chapman Andrews. They were searching for the origins of man. Instead, they stumbled across the fossils of a dinosaur called Protoceratops. Nearby was a nest of her eggs, the first ever found. The eggs would capture the imagination of the public. More than bones, they seem to evoke an image of dinosaurs as living creatures. 50 years later, and halfway around the world, Jack Horner would unearth the eggs of an animal called Hypsilophodon.
Once the eggs are back from Egg Mountain, what I'm interested in finding out is what the animal's behavior was like. And so when we find the eggs, all we're finding is usually just the lower ends of the eggs with the top missing. And the fact that we find the lower ends of the eggs intact implies that the babies hatched out of the eggs and left the nest immediately.
Now Horner must test his theory. Trapped within for more than 700,000 centuries, a secret is about to be coaxed from the fossil egg. At a hospital in Bozeman, Montana, a CAT scan, normally used for imaging the human body, peers deep into the ancient egg, searching for signs of an embryo. Imperceptible to the untrained eye, the CAT scan reveals what Horner is looking for: tiny fragments of bone scattered within the egg. After the egg is opened, the evidence is pieced back together. The bones tell an amazing story.
We find the ends of the bones are well formed. They have a nice smooth surface on them. It means that the animal is capable of using its limbs like an adult. This is a model of a hatchling, and basically what it is a not much larger edition of the embryo. But by looking at the skeleton of the embryo and figuring out where the muscle scars are, we can reconstruct the animal, what it looked like in life.
Dinosaurs. Boy, I've been dreaming about dinosaurs since I was...
Because there is always knowledge to be gained, new paths to explore, and mysteries to unlock, the Infinite Voyage is made possible by a grant from Digital Equipment Corporation.
And so, from the fossil evidence comes intimate details of the life of a Hypsilophodon. It was an agile little creature that could leave the nest soon after birth and begin its search for food. Because their nests were found in colonies, they probably organized in groups. On the shore of the ancient lake, not far from the original nesting sites, Horner finds egg fragments of an entirely different animal.
In contrast to the Hypsilophodons, we have the other nest. Instead of finding the lower ends of the eggs intact, we have pieces of eggshell. broken up in the nests. We have one of the nests that we found had the remains of 7 babies this size, together with a lot of very large eggshell fragments. And they were crushed in such a way it appeared that they were, in fact, embryonic remains. And then after reassembling the skeleton and putting some eggshell together to see what the size of the egg is, we have a wooden model of how big the egg would be. We could do that by actually measuring the curvature of the eggshell and get some general ideas as to the shape of the thing, then reconstruct the egg and reconstruct the skeleton, and we can see that the young one that we found is in fact small enough to fit into the egg. By looking at the bone structure of these particular, of the hatchlings, we can see whether or not the bone condyles are formed like the Hypsilophodonts or not. And here is thigh bone from the little hatchling. And if we look at the ends of the bones, the joint ends, the condyles are not formed. In fact, it's very spongy at the ends. When we look even at the individual that's a meter long, the ends are still spongy. They're not smooth at the ends. What this tells us is that these bones had a very massive cartilaginous cone at the end, very thick cartilage. And we see a very similar situation in what we call altricial birds, birds that are nest-bound. It hatches out and then is brought food by the parent, and all of the energy goes into actually growing very rapidly. It doesn't have to expend energy going out to get food on its own or walking around. It just stays in the nest. The limb bones suggest that it couldn't walk very well anyway. In fact, highly unlikely that it could get out of the nest and walk at all.
Here was evidence of a gentle, caring creature. Horner named her Dinosaur, the good mother lizard. From the tiniest fragments, stunning details of social behavior and nurturing in an ancient dinosaur breeding colony. Jack Horner's work has given us a rare glimpse of life on Earth more than 70 million years ago. Here, close to the shore of the great inland sea, Hypsilophodons and Myosaurs foraged and lived alongside a smaller, meat-eating dinosaur called Troodon. On a nearby island, eggs were laid and babies hatched. The great drama of life was played out again and again as packs of these meat-eaters invaded the colony and carried off the young. The predator and the prey. The fertile wheat fields of Alberta, Canada, are scarred by a geological feature known as the Badlands. Embedded in each layer are millions of years of dinosaur history. The region is a magnet to paleontologists like Philip Curry, assistant director of the Tyrrell Museum.
It was more than 100 years ago that the first dinosaur skeleton was discovered in this region. And very quickly, Alberta became well known as a place to go to collect good articulated dinosaur skeletons.
And collect them they did. By the turn of the century, tons of specimens had been crated and shipped to museums. Since 1980, Curry and his team have excavated a single bone bed containing hundreds of dinosaurs, all of the same species. The team is trying to reconstruct what happened.
The best interpretation we have right now is that a herd of Centrosaurus was traveling through this particular region 75 million years ago or so, and that these animals tried to cross a river in flood. Now, crossing a river in flood is normally not a problem for any animal as long as they're going as individuals. But as soon as they start moving in herds, and very large herds at that, then they start running into problems.
A herd of wildebeest in Africa is a chilling analogy. Crossing a river by the thousands, they often get tangled in confusion and panic. Many drown. The geology of the Alberta Badlands reveals this region was once the site of an ancient river. It is here that a herd of centrosaurs attempted a crossing. Like the wildebeest, some probably panicked, got in each other's way, and drowned. Their bodies washed downstream and collected on the riverbank.
Now, we have evidence for what happened next because a lot of the bones in the centrosaurus bone bed are fractured like this. They have these nice spiral fractures on them. And normally you don't get this unless the bone is fresh, and this indicates that these animals were probably trampled. In addition to that, we found large numbers of theropod teeth, and in fact, it's the second most common type of animal in the bone bed. There was a tremendous variety of them. Carnivorous dinosaurs, like modern carnivorous mammals, probably were active carnivores most of the time. But when there was a readily available source of carcasses, they almost certainly turned into scavengers as well. And that's not unusual now as then. The best evidence, though, comes from the bone fragments themselves. And if you look at this one, for example, you can see where a tooth has gone across and sawn the edge of the bone. And in fact, here we can even see little serrations, which are on the back of the tooth and the front of the tooth, which have sheared the flesh off the bone. And when we find tooth marks like these all over these bone fragments, and there's no question at all that these things have been eaten by these large carnivorous dinosaurs.
Today, the scavengers are birds, and a new bone bed may be in the making. It is an unending cycle, an age-old story that gives us dramatic insight into the history of life on Earth. The centrosaur bone bed has contributed much to our understanding of a single event. But Curry believes this mass death is part of a larger story.
The evidence from the centrosaurus bone bed is starting to build into something much bigger because in conjunction with some of the footprint sites that we know about, the nesting dinosaur sites in southern Alberta and Montana, and other types of bone beds that we're finding, we're getting an overall picture now that dinosaurs were moving in large herds very frequently. Now, this doesn't mean that all dinosaurs were doing that, but certainly a large number of species were. One has to come to several conclusions by looking at these different lines of evidence. And first of all, that the dinosaurs were going to the same general areas every year, year after year, to lay their eggs, and they would stay around there until the young were old enough that they could join the herd and go on the move themselves. So there's this parental care aspect to all these lines of evidence. Secondly, you have to wonder why dinosaurs would collect in such large herds. And I think that the strongest line of evidence right now is that dinosaurs were in fact migrating animals.
Like the wildebeest, the dinosaurs may well have migrated in vast numbers across the landscape of the ancient world. If so, it must have been a breathtaking spectacle. The University of California, Berkeley. Paleontologist David Weishempel of the Johns Hopkins University has come to study a remarkable fossil that may provide clues to possible dinosaur communication. The animal was Parasaurolophus. It had a strange, elongated crest on its head. For a long time, scientists pondered over its purpose.
Some scientists early on thought that because, say in this Parasaurolophus, the crest projects behind the head, well, because they're hollow, they were used as air storage chambers, say for underwater feeding. Other scientists have thought it was used as a snorkel, but there's no hole at the end. Another idea was that the crest was used to cool the brain. It's hollow and very close to the brain inside the skull. But there are other animals that lived at the same time that didn't have these sorts of things, and yet they survived. So it's hardly likely that the crests were used specifically to cool the brain.
The puzzle intrigued Weishampel. He decided to investigate by slicing open one of the fossil heads to expose the inside of the crested chamber.
So what I found was, say this is a skull, and you're looking at a cutaway of the crest, and that it's hollow from the base of the crest down here up through the tip of the crest. The crest is hollow. There's a passageway along all the way to the end of the crest. Sharp U-bend here. And then it continues along above itself all the way out to the nostrils. So if we position a vocal organ, some sort of sound generator in the throat here that produces some sound, that sound is forced through the back of the throat, past the back of the palate, up into the crest, along the entire length of the crest, and scoots around here at the U-bend, comes along here, and the sound is emitted into the environment at the level of the nostrils, and then it's out. An animal as bizarre as Parasaurolophus really called for kind of a creative approach. So what I did was go down to the local hardware store, get some PVC tubing, got some small bits to fit on the end to make that real sharp U-bend at the end of the crest, fashioned myself kind of a creative little mouthpiece where the vocal organ is, and when I was done, what I got was, believe it or not, this model. But actually, this is just about the size and shape of the crest of these rather bizarre animals. And what you'll be hearing next is the sounds that these dinosaurs made some 75 million years ago.
And now, a hadrosaur minuet in G. There were other members of the crested hadrosaur family. Perhaps they too were capable of producing sound. The ear canal of a crocodile bears a striking resemblance to that of a crested hadrosaur. Crocodiles hear very low-frequency sounds. Comparing the two led Weishampel to ask, might dinosaurs have used such sounds to communicate?
Low-frequency sound carries a tremendous distance compared to high-frequency sound, simply over any kind of terrain, because they are they have such long wavelengths that things don't get in the way of low-frequency sound. So if the object of the game is to communicate over kilometers, miles, low-frequency sound will do it, whereas high-frequency sound will not. The other advantage is that low-frequency sound sources are very hard to locate, so that a hadrosaur out there honking away is going to be tough to locate. And just think of going to a choir concert, and you close your eyes. It's really easy to pick out where the soprano is, whereas it's very difficult to pick out where the baritones and basses are. The same thing applies to hadrosaurs honking in the late Cretaceous, that if the object of your communication is, look out, there's a tyrannosaur here, and you don't want the tyrannosaur to focus in on you, you make noises at really low frequency.
So Parasaurolophus probably used low-frequency sound to confuse predators as well as to communicate. Communication denotes social behavior, such as that displayed by African elephants. Like elephants, could the dinosaurs use low-frequency sound to warn of impending danger, protect their young, and coordinate the movements of the herd? Weishampel believes at least one dinosaur could. The highlight of a children's birthday party is the guest appearance of Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Sophie, how old are you today?
The commercial world has merchandised dinosaurs on a massive scale. From toys to t-shirts and games to party favors, they have become curious companions, part of our lifestyle and our culture.
I'm making the tail. I'm making the tail. I'm making the tail too.
A dinosaur may also be a child's first introduction to science. Who is not familiar with Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and that perennial favorite, Tyrannosaurus Rex?
I got his tail.
Yet the ancient world was home to a much larger cast of characters. Literally hundreds of species have now been identified. But it is our insight into their physiology and behavior that has brought them to life. A big brachiosaur could weigh over 70 tons and tower more than 50 feet above the ground, heavier than a herd of elephants and as tall as a 5-story building. Some of the plant-eating giants, like Diplodocus and Apatosaurus, were as long as a tennis court, but they were probably docile, gentle creatures. Most coelurosaurs were fast and tiny, some no bigger than a chicken. And chylosaurs were fully armored and weighed up to 3 tons. Their club-like tails were surely formidable weapons. Oviraptorosaurs were agile, nimble carnivores with relatively large brains and an ability to hunt down prey with deadly speed. Dinosaurs were weird and wonderful in so many ways, and they were real. As creatures of flesh and blood, they were truly magnificent. The more we learn about them, the more we need to ask. Perhaps the most controversial question of all concerns their fate. In 1987, Robert Bakker was on a routine visit to the Cleveland Museum of Natural History when he made an intriguing discovery.
There are 2 places to hunt for dinosaurs. You can get yourself a Jeep, and go to the Badlands of Montana and dig holes. You can find new kinds of dinosaurs. Then there's the other place. You go to a basement like this, a gloomy place, where museums keep their research collections in careful storage, specimens collected 20, 30 years ago, waiting for the scholar to come by and read the bones. And these new discoveries of dinosaurs in basements and in the Badlands are challenging everything we thought was true about dinosaurs. These new discoveries are saying we've got to rethink the ideas that dinosaurs were cold-blooded, rethink the idea that they were stupid and slow, and rethink the idea that they died without descendants. And guaranteed, in museums like this, there'll be every year new discoveries about dinosaurs.
Relegated to a dusty shelf for more than 40 years was a fossil that bore an uncanny resemblance to Tyrannosaurus rex. Bakker renamed it Nanotyrannus, the pygmy tyrant.
Now, the really neat thing about this hit is that it's a downsized version of the most famous dinosaur in the world, that is Tyrannosaurus rex. Now you look at T-Rex, you've got an animal with a head 4 feet long, with a body that's 5 or 6 tons. Nano is a close relative, a head only as big as a polar bear, a body maybe 600 pounds, pony size. And yet the little dinosaur and the giant dinosaur share the same architectural stamp. You look at this head with the eye of an anatomist, and what you see written is bird, not lizard, but bird. The narrow snout, the big eyes, and especially the plumbing. Bird in these air canals, in the eyebrow, in the cheek, and all over the brain case and the back of the skull. So every time this little dinosaur took a breath, air went in and around every part of its head to cool the head. Air conditioning means the animal needed to cool itself. Why would it have to cool? Because it was a very active animal.
More important is the similarity between this skull and a small carnivorous dinosaur called Troodon. The features of this lightly built hunter show an amazing resemblance to many living birds. Scientists have long suspected that birds are descended from a very ancient animal, but which one? Many now feel that Troodon was one of the missing links in a long and complex chain that reaches back 150 million years. Beneath its colored feathers and exotic plumage, the anatomy of a bird points unmistakably to its dinosaur ancestry.
You can map every joint and every bump and every mark left by a muscle right onto the skeleton of a turkey or roadrunner or an ostrich. These are not vague resemblances. They're absolutely precise. There are 8,400 species alive today that are direct descendants of dinosaurs, and those 8,000 odd species are birds. Every single bird, from hummingbird to pigeon to ostrich, every single living bird is without question the direct descendant of a small meat-eating dinosaur. And what we've discovered this last year is that meat-eating dinosaur, that bird ancestor, was a close relative of the Tyrannosaurus, a close relative of Tyrannosaurus rex. So when you look at your canary, you're seeing a bit of T-Rex.
Today, many scientists believe that birds did not only descend from dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs. So on a cool autumn evening, look up. You may just see the dinosaurs migrating. Eventually, inevitably, the giants died. While nature decreed that at least one species would survive, most of them would not. After a staggering 140 million years, they perished. Here in the rocks at the end of the Cretaceous period, their fossil record ends. How did they die? There are many theories. Was it a single cataclysm or a series of events? A widespread viral infection or a deteriorating climate and diminishing food supply? Could it have been something more spectacular, not of this earth? A fiery encounter with a meteor and the resulting devastation from a firestorm as soot and ash filled the atmosphere blotting out the sun and destroying most of life. Perhaps we shall never know. But when the Cretaceous period ended, the dinosaurs and more than half of all species on Earth were gone. In Paris, the city of Georges Cuvier, where the great dinosaur hunt began, Stephen Jay Gould reflects on the significance of their fate.
Extinction is no shame, no sign of disgrace or failure. In fact, in a world full of changing environments and occasional catastrophe, all species eventually become extinct. It's the fate of all creatures. 99% of all species that have ever lived are gone. In fact, more than that, extinction is the motor of substantial change in evolution. If extinction didn't occur, a successful group would dominate and it would last forever. In that sense, the extinction of dinosaurs is the absolute prerequisite to the evolution of large mammals and to our own existence, for that matter. Most people think that mammals evolved towards the end of the dinosaurs' reign, and even think that mammals were responsible for the death of dinosaurs by virtue of mammalian superiority. But that's not true. Mammals first arose about the same time as dinosaurs. Mammals lived for all of the 100 million years of the dinosaurs' reign, but not as very successful creatures. Mammals were relatively rare. They never got any bigger than this. They lived under the foot of dinosaurs, in the nooks and crannies of a dinosaur's world, never making any progress, never displacing dinosaurs from their position of dominance. If the dinosaurs had not died, perhaps in some catastrophe, no reason to think dinosaurs wouldn't still be here, wouldn't still be dominating the Earth. They'd lived for 100 million years. Why not for 60 million more, which is the whole period of mammalian success? And if dinosaurs had not died, I imagine that mammals would still be small creatures like this, living in the nooks and crannies of their world, and we wouldn't be here.
Once we knew only that they vanished. Now we know that dinosaurs ruled the land longer than any creature before them or since. Generation after generation, they roamed every continent and explored every niche. They came in bewildering numbers and in every shape and size. They could not foresee their own extinction, nor prevent it. But all things must die. For 140 million years, they controlled the destiny of life on this planet. Georges Cuvier once noted, man has been granted but a moment's sojourn on the Earth. In that brief moment, we alone are the only species to comprehend and appreciate the great dinosaurs.
Oh gosh, 140